Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. Former Vice President Dick Cheney, who served under President George W. Bush from 2001 to 2009, has died at the age of 84 from complications of pneumonia and heart disease. His family praised him as a great and good man who lived a life of courage, honor and love. President Trump has called New York mayoral frontrunner Zoran Mamdani a quote-unquote Jew hater, urging Jewish voters to reject him. Mamdani, a 34-year-old leftist poised to become the city's first Muslim mayor, has not responded to the remarks. Hamas says its fighters have found the body of an Israeli soldier in Gaza and are preparing to hand it over to Israel. The announcement comes amid ongoing efforts to maintain the fragile ceasefire. The European Parliament has opened debate on making the EU-US tariff deal conditional on US concessions and time limits, a move that could rekindle trade tensions with the Trump administration. The pact includes 15% US tariffs on EU exports. Residents in northern Afghanistan are clearing debris after a 6.3 magnitude earthquake killed at least 27 people and injured nearly 1,000. The quake struck near Mazar-e-Sharif, damaging its historic Blue Mosque and several homes. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Syrians no longer have grounds for asylum in the country, claiming Syria's civil war is now over. The remarks come as his government faces pressure from a surging far right and debate over migration policy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says a new European Commission report shows Kyiv is confidently moving towards EU membership. He urged Brussels to open negotiations on the first 3 clusters and remove artificial obstacles to unity. South Korea's spy agency says a summit between Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump is highly possible, likely after joint US-South Korea drills in March. The NIS believes Kim is ready for dialogue once conditions are met. We start this hour in America's financial capital, and polls have now opened in New York City's mayoral race, marking a record-breaking early turnout. More than 730,000 New Yorkers have already cast their ballots, the highest early voting figure since the year of 1969. The race pits left-wing Democratic nominee Zoran Mamdani against former Governor Andrew Cuomo, running as an independent, and also on the ticket, Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa. The race took a sharp turn after US President Donald Trump called Mamdani a Jew hater in just the past hour, and he's also urged Jewish voters not to support him. Now across the country, voting is also underway in Virginia, New Jersey, and also in California, where early participation has surged. In New York, polls close at 9 p.m. local time, with officials expecting turnout to surpass 2 million, the highest once again since the year of 1969. We are now joined since Quinton Hitchcock. He's an international affairs expert and he joins us live from Washington, D.C. Quinton, this mayoral race has not just captured New York, but not just America even, but also the world. Why is this mayoral election so crucial, so different from the past, and why have we seen that almost record-breaking early voting figure registered?
Well, very simple, because right now America, and really the Democrat Party in America, is at a turning point. In all likelihood, Thomas, New York City is about to elect the very first Democrat socialist in city history, in our country's history. There's never been a candidate like Mamdani. He's depending on the poll you're looking at, anywhere from 10 to 14% ahead. So in all likelihood, he's going to win this race. And this is a city that has dealt with so many different types of candidates in its political past. 9/11 and the relationship that Jewish people have with the Muslim Americans in this city. It's really quite unprecedented. But he is. People don't realize this outside this country, that Mamdani is now the face of the Democrat Party. And that's a party that since Barack Obama has kind of left office, has really been looking for the next person. Is it going to be, a governor? Is it going to be? It wasn't Joe Biden. So that's why this election is so captivating. Is people are looking at this man, rightfully so, like he is going to be the next face of this party. And what can be troubling for the other half of our country is the Democrat Party is taking even further strides to the left, and in many cases, rejecting Democrat policies as they have been for decades. So there's a lot to be on the lookout for tonight. But New York is going to be ground zero for politics for the next 24 hours. That's for sure.
And Quinton, what more can you tell us about this man, Zoran Mamdani, who is soon projected to be the leader of America's largest city, its financial center? 8.5 million people live in New York City, and a self-proclaimed democratic socialist is set to lead it. Tell us a bit more about his campaign, what issues that he's ran on, and why he has gained so much traction behind him.
So he's first of all, he's raised a ton of money. Okay. And in that city, you have to, if you're going to be competitive. He is run on socialist policies that favor, subsidies for the poor, which, again, if you're going to be a successful candidate in an electorate like New York City, you have to run on those policies. But he has been very controversial. There's countless examples, videos online of him speaking in different accents. A lot of people on the other side of the political aisle consider this man to be a con man. Born and raised in New York City, comes from a very wealthy family, very influential family. So this, and I want to just pause for a second. The idea that President Trump would be voicing support for Andrew Cuomo, one of the most hated governors in the state's history, one of the most hated figures in Democrat politics, left office about 2 years ago in disgrace. I think a little bit longer than that, but that just shows you like how divisive this party has become and how divisive of a candidate Mamdani is, that the president of the United States and Elon Musk and many other people in the Trump orbit would voice support for the likes of Governor Andrew Cuomo. I mean, just unthinkable. And that's, again, one of the many reasons why this campaign is attracting so much attention, both here domestically and internationally.
And Quinton, just finally and very quickly, could you give us a rundown on the other two candidates and how likely they are to win this thing, if at all, their public appearances, their debates, etc. What's it been like leading up to today's polls?
Well, Curtis Sliwa has about 0.0 chance of winning. You can take that to the bank. He's a beloved figure for a relatively small group of people in New York. Even conservatives aren't really crazy about him. The Trump administration's not crazy about him, so he has no chance. Andrew Cuomo, it'll be competitive, okay? It's going to be relatively close. But again, this is a governor, this is a career politician who has been in office, and his father is a former governor, by the way. So he is the epitome of what we call career politicians in this country, not popular. Again, left office in disgrace with sexual harassment scandals surrounding him everywhere. So I don't expect him to really be too competitive tonight. I think it'll be relatively close. My guess is Mamdani wins between 7 and 8 points. So I don't think the other two have much of a chance.
Okay, Quinton Hitchcock, thank you very much for bringing us that insight. Do stay with us as we have further updates. We move on now and away from the United States, and the European Commission has said that the European Union and China have agreed to continue engaging on rare earth licensing facilitation measures, including discussions on general licenses aimed at easing trade flows. In a statement, the Commission has said it will continue dialogue with Beijing to help restore supply chain functioning while ensuring that all steps remain consistent with EU economic security interests. Rare earths are critical for a range of high-tech and green industries, and the talks reflect ongoing efforts to stabilize global supply chains amid recent export restrictions. Okay, we are now joined once again by Quinton Hitchcock. Quinton, the European Commission says Brussels and Beijing will keep engaging on this rare earth licensing and general export rules. How significant is this dialogue, considering the recent tensions over these Chinese export curbs?
Well, I think it's significant for the EU and also China. Again, this comes down to China. I think I was on your show a couple days ago talking about this, that China needs leverage. They're looking for more leverage because the United States doesn't really have a great relationship with the EU. That's no secret. President Trump, J.D. Vance, that entire administration has been highly at odds, highly critical of the EU. So I think China sees an opportunity, and they're trying to regain the upper hand. Remember, China is really dominant. They are the dominant force globally when it comes to rare earth materials. And we all know rare earth materials are what governments need to, build military defense systems, aerospace equipment, medical equipment, technology. So this is a very, very serious thing for China. They're trying to seize on an opportunity, which is why I think they're trying to renegotiate better deals for them, especially in wake of the United States going elsewhere for their rare earth materials. And I think the European Union is obviously looking to become less dependent on the United States from a militaristic standpoint. So that makes this all the more interesting.
Yes, indeed. Quinton Hitchcock, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to get your insight on these issues, and thank you for taking the time. We stay, but move on to a related development. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered the government to prepare a roadmap for the extraction of rare earth minerals to be completed by December the 1st. The directive, issued following a Far Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, also calls for the development of transport links and logistics centres along Russia's borders with China and North Korea. These plans include 2 existing railway bridges to China and a new bridge to North Korea, which is expected to be operational by 2026. Russia has expressed interest in partnering with the United States on rare earth projects, though progress has been limited due to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Meanwhile, China has imposed export restrictions in response to US tariffs this year. However, they have now resumed those restrictions. Okay. Of course, we are talking about these ongoing talks between the United States and Moscow. The Russian president has ordered the government to prepare this roadmap for the extraction of rare earth minerals to be completed by December the 1st. Of course, China, a hugely dominant force in the rare earth world. Russia has expressed interest in partnering with the United States on rare earth projects, though progress has been limited due to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. And of course, China imposed export restrictions in response to the US tariffs, but those have now been dropped after that hugely significant meeting with US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea just last week on the sidelines of the APEC summit. We both saw the 2 world's largest economies come to some sort of temporary trade truce in their years-long lasting trade war. Okay, we are now joined by Keith Vaz. He's a former UK minister and he joins us live from Goa in India. Keith, thank you for joining us here on the programme. It's a pleasure to have you as always. Keith, Moscow is now drafting a roadmap to boost its own rare earth production. Is Russia trying to fill a gap created by China's export restrictions or just hedging against future sanctions?
Good evening, Thomas. I think they're trying to do both. They want to make sure that they are self-sufficient. They are a vast country. I was looking at the map of the world just before this interview, and I'm sure everyone is completely surprised at the size of Russia. I would be amazed if they didn't have more rare earth materials and minerals within their own country. The reason why they get it from China is because it's probably cheaper for them. In the long run, though, they have to become self-sufficient. And it could be about the possibility of sanctions being levied against China, but it also could be this drives for self-sufficiency. And that is, I think, what they're probably going to do. Because if they don't, then they are going to be held hostage, if you like, by other countries and other powers. And even though they formed a stronger relationship with China since the start of the Trump administration, it is very clear that they will be shaking hands in a very diplomatic way. They're not buddies. So it is not a surprise to me that they've decided to do this.
And Keith, this directive also calls for the development of transport links and logistics hubs along Russia's borders with China and also North Korea, with existing railway bridges that are now disused once again being used again, and a new bridge being built to North Korea, which is expected to be operational by 2026. How might this influence this trade relationship going forward, particularly with Pyongyang involved?
Well, I think that it is important to ensure that at this minute, the instability in the trading relations between countries is quite profound. And therefore, I think it is important that they look at these trade relationships and trade links and try to develop them, because they don't actually know what's going to happen one day after another. So I'm not surprised if there is a stronger relationship being developed, and it is a relationship that is obviously to be treated with some degree of caution, knowing exactly who they're dealing with. But they're going to have to deal with anyone now, and they've always, to some extent, had reasonably good relationships with Pyongyang, and therefore it's not going to be a problem for them.
Okay, Keith, do stay with us. We have further news updates, but this time coming out of Europe. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has slammed Hungary's Viktor Orban, accusing him of providing support to Russia. President Zelenskyy stated that Hungary is blocking Ukraine's membership while highlighting the fact that Ukraine did not get any support from Hungary in the war against Russia. Hungary has vetoed Ukraine's entry into the European Union as well. And formally, Hungary, as president of the EU Council, vetoed Ukraine's bid last year in July. The row escalated when Viktor Orban convened national consultation to gauge Hungarian citizens' interests and their views on EU membership. And the standoff between Ukraine and Russia continues as the leaders continue to trade allegations against one another. Meanwhile, the European Union's Enlargement Commissioner, Marta Koss, has accused Georgia of backsliding on fundamentals of the European Union membership process. She made the statement as Brussels unveiled its annual scorecard for countries seeking the EU membership. Let's in fact listen in to what she had to say.
Amid the challenges caused by Russia's war of aggression, Ukraine has demonstrated its commitments to its EU path, moving forward on key reforms. Steps already taken are laying the foundations for recovery and opening space for greater private sector involvement It will be essential to sustain this momentum and prevent any risk of backsliding, in particular anti-corruption. Following the last year's European Council conclusions that the Georgian government's actions have de facto led to a halt of the pre-accession process, and in light of Georgia's continued backsliding on the fundamentals since then, the Commission considers Georgia a candidate country in name only.
Keith Vaz joins us once again. Keith, let's talk about Hungary. President Zelenskyy has accused Viktor Orban of giving support to Russia by blocking Ukraine's EU membership here. How serious is this rift within the European Union?
Well, it's always going to be a serious rift because Hungary has always been very critical of President Zelenskyy personally, but also any move for Ukraine to come in. This is odd, though. If you look at the overall strategy, Hungary actually is very critical of the EU, and one wonders why, if they are critical of the EU, Hungary remains in the EU. And I'm very surprised that other EU leaders aren't turning around and saying, as they did to Britain when we were making a fuss about our membership, well, if you don't like it, then you can leave. You know, the trouble is there is a lack of leadership on the EU. Now, I can remember the speech given by my former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, in Ankara when he announced that Turkey was going to be given candidate status to join the EU. That was over 25 years ago. And of course, Turkey did not join. So I'm not sure what Viktor Orban's problem is. He can at least support the entry of Ukraine, knowing full well that it will be years and years before the Ukrainian government is going to open all the chapters, they're called chapters, the negotiating treatise. Before they open all the chapters, they meet the criteria, they go from candidate to country about to join. I mean, this is going to take forever. It's taken 25 years for Turkey before they realized they were never going to be let in. So they said, thank you very much, we don't want to join. So it's odd that he should be playing this game. It is posturing on the part of Mr. Orban, but he has always been quite critical of them. So it's not a surprise that he is doing this. And of course, as we know, under the EU voting system, even though there is a majority voting on most issues, getting another country into the club requires everyone's agreement. We had a great deal of problems with Cyprus joining because of the possibility of a veto from the Greeks. And that made it very, very difficult indeed. So I think what we're going to have to do is watch this space in the full knowledge that even if Mr. Orban said you can become a candidate country, they're not going to join tomorrow. It's a massive task. And of course, Ukraine is in the middle of a war. So where are they going to have the time to sit down and negotiate in Brussels when they're having all these drones flying over them? It's a bit of a red herring from both Zelenskyy and Viktor Orban. And as a result, there will be no progress.
And do you see clashes possibly erupting in the bloc here? And what does Orban gain, what does Hungary gain from not being outward supportive towards Vladimir Putin, let's say, but certainly making certain provocative statements? He's, of course, said that he thinks that Russia has already won this war in the past. He's also going to push, he said he's going to push Donald Trump to try and get those sanctions removed off those two huge crude companies in Russia. What does Viktor Orban get out of that?
Well, I think he's a populist leader, and populist leaders don't really have to have a reason why they oppose something other than to say to their country, we're standing up to the EU. Now, I did the negotiations that brought Hungary into the EU. I was the Minister for Europe under Tony Blair, and with colleagues, especially from France and Germany and Italy, we moved heaven and earth to get Hungary in. There was even the possibility that Hungary would not be able to join unless Romania and Bulgaria joined at the same time. So the Hungarian people, if there was a referendum in Hungary tomorrow, they will vote to stay in. They don't want to come out of the EU. Why would they want to come out of the EU? There's a whole lot of countries who are desperate to join the EU. I'm not saying the EU is, the centre of all saintism. There's a lot of problems with the EU, the way in which they make their decisions, the lack of leadership, the waste of money, the inability to deal with the migration crisis. So there's a lot of things wrong with it, but that goes with the leadership. I think they're just badly led at the moment. They've got a very weak president of the Commission. I think they've got a very weak president of the Council of Ministers, and that's not really very good for the enterprise. So what we need to say to Mr. Orban is, look, if you don't want to let anyone else join, and you are saying you want to leave, then leave. But this is a very complicated process, and Hungary was desperate to join the EU, as I remember. The number of trips I made to Hungary to discuss this with foreign ministers was because they wanted to join. They were prepared to accept virtually anything, but they wanted to join. Now they're in, they were led by a populist leader who has to show he's standing up to something. Even if the EU wasn't a target, he would have to create a target. He is in the mold of Donald Trump and other populist leaders, both on the left and on the right, who feel that the only way to do this is to be able to show that they've got some kind of bogeyman they're dealing with. And in this particular case, it's the EU. The trouble is, there are a lot of problems with the EU, and on a number of them, Viktor Orban is probably right.
Keith Vaz, always fascinating talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us and taking the time out of your day. We now, for our final story, we finish in the Indo-Pacific. And in the Philippines, 6 military personnel have been killed after a Hui helicopter crashed while on a disaster relief mission in the wake of Typhoon Kalmage. The aircraft went down on the island of Minangkabau, where it had been deployed to assist communities hit by the storm. A search operation later discovered 6 bodies believed to be those of the pilot and crew. The tragedy has come as the death toll from Kalmage rose to 40, mostly in the central province of Cebu, after torrential rains and flooding swept through homes and communities, leaving several others missing or unaccounted for. Thousands have been evacuated across the Visayas region, while power and telecommunications remain down in many areas. More than 180 flights were cancelled and sea travel has been suspended. Authorities have warned of continued flooding and storm surges, and rescues and recovery efforts press on in the hardest hit areas. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching.